So, Robert, I think we could hear a gong from you, perhaps. This is the moment.
Okay. Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Church of Wilmington, Delaware, both to those of you here in person in the sanctuary and to those of you online at home. My name is Helen Foss, and I think I just lost my mic. And I'm delighted to welcome you in my role as worship associate. Welcome to you all, no matter the hue of your skin or the origin of your ethnicity. Welcome whomever you love and wherever you are on your spiritual journey. You are welcome here. Over the next weeks, we worship associates have decided to feature one of our 7 UU principles as we welcome you. Most of us can easily recite the first and the 7th principle, but the others, not so much. Today, I'm putting forward the 2nd principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. This principle serves to point us to something beyond the first, the inherent worth and dignity of every person in our first principle. It points us to the collective responsibility in the larger community, not just something we do one-on-one, but something that has systemic implications and can inform our entire cultural way of being. That we need one another, along with compassion, to achieve equity and justice. Much to think about. Now, if you're new to First Unitarian, I invite you to check out our website, firstuuwilm.org, to learn more about us and to sign up for our email newsletter. Now, as we prepare our hearts and minds for worship, just a quick reminder for those of you present in the sanctuary regarding some of our guidelines for meeting in the building and on the grounds. They include leaving masks on at all times unless we have a speaking role. There'll be no coffee hour, so we ask that you not gather in the building following the service. In fact, we invite you to gather on the lawn to the left of the entrance to greet one another afterwards. But please stay masked and maintain social distancing. During the hymns, we'll not sing, but you're invited to express yourself by using simple movements. Bottom line is, we're taking the utmost care during this time of COVID for the safety of all. Thank you. And now let us continue with worship.
I want to add my welcome to Helen's for those who are joining us here in the building and those who are joining us online. I'm the Reverend Larry Piers, minister here at First Unitarian Church of Wilmington. In fact, even though we are meeting this morning during this time in different places, I want us to have a sense of our connection to one another. So join me in this. Staying seated, I want you to just reach out your hands like this, whether you're sitting at home or here in the building, and feel that connection as if you're joining hands with someone else. And imagine the faces and the hands of others who we're joined with, and just feel that sensation of being joined together, though we are in different places. My hands got just a little warmer as I did that. And so, let us recognize our connection with one another, a deep connection that cannot be divided necessarily, but that we can draw upon again and again. As I read these words by Tagore for our call to worship. The same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measures. It is the same life that shoots in joy through the dust of the earth in numberless blades of grass and breaks into tumultuous waves of leaves and flowers. It is the same life that is rocked in the ocean cradle of birth and death in ebbs and flows. I feel my limbs are made glorious by the touch of this world of life. And my pride is from the life throb of ages, dancing in my blood this moment.
For those of you watching at home who have a chalice, I invite you now to join me by lighting it as I read these words by Deborah Falk from The Chalice is a Symbol. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all her people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each of us.
Comfort me, O my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, O my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul.
Please join me in affirming our mission. First Unitarian Church of Wilmington is a beloved community that nourishes minds and spirits, fights injustice, and transforms the world through loving action.
Hi, everyone. It is great to be here with you. Today, I am sharing the story One Smile, written by Cindy McKinley and illustrated by Mary Gregg Byrne. One breezy summer morning, Katie was walking through the park with her mother. "Hurry up, sweetheart," her mother urged, "or we'll be late for the bus." "Oh, Mommy," said the little girl, "I sure hope our van is fixed in time for Grandpa's birthday party." Just then, they noticed a sad young man sitting alone on a bench. Katie stopped for a moment and smiled brightly at him. The young man had lost his job and was feeling very discouraged. Dozens of people had walked by that morning, but no one seemed to notice him. Then this little girl appeared and touched his heart with the sweetest smile he'd ever seen. He suddenly felt inspired to start looking for a new job. As he hurried down the busy street, the man saw a woman struggling to change a tire. "Let me help you," he said without hesitation. The woman had been driving to an important meeting when she heard a loud thump, 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 and pulled over to the side of the road. Many people had passed by before this helpful young man came to rescue her. Later, as she finished lunch, the woman was still feeling grateful for the young man's help, so she left an extra large tip. Thanks a lot," the waitress called out. On the way home, the waitress decided to surprise her children. Using the extra tip money, she picked up some sodas, potato salad, and fried chicken. Then she bought the soccer ball her children had been hoping for. "Surprise," she called out. "Let's go have a picnic." "Wow, Mom," her youngest boy exclaimed. "You're the best." "Can we invite the girl next door? She's new in town and doesn't have any friends yet." "Good idea," his mother said. "Let's invite the whole family." The little girl had been sitting alone in her room, missing her grandparents and friends, when the phone rang. She couldn't believe the boy next door was calling. "Maybe we could be friends," she thought. The girl and her parents brought some homemade brownies, and they all enjoyed a very special evening together in the park. After she got ready for bed, the little girl couldn't wait to call her grandma back home on the farm. Guess what, Nana? We had a really fun picnic with our neighbors. I think I'm going to like it here after all. Nana could hear the excitement in her granddaughter's voice. Well, honey, I sure miss having you around, she said, but I'm glad to know you're making new friends. After hanging up, Nana took out her favorite stationery. Wanting to share the good feelings, she wrote a letter to each of her grandchildren. Inside every envelope, she tucked a special sheet of animal stickers. Nana's youngest grandson was about to leave for the doctor's office when his letter arrived. All morning, he had been nervous about getting a shot. But after seeing the animal stickers, he forgot all about being afraid. In the doctor's waiting room, the boy sat next to a sad little girl with a cast on her arm. Here, he said, maybe my new animal stickers will help you feel better. The little girl stopped crying and carefully placed the stickers on her cast. As the children giggled together, her father sighed with relief. His daughter had been upset for hours, and now she was happy again. After taking her home, the father rushed back to his busy auto shop. That night, a young man walked into his shop. "Do you have any job openings?" he asked. "I work hard, and I'm good at fixing cars." Still remembering the little boy's kindness in the doctor's office, the girl's father decided to give the stranger a chance. "Well," he said, "I could use some extra help. Let's give it a try." The grateful young man arrived early for work the next morning. His first job was completing repairs on a dark green van. Just before noon, he returned the keys to a woman and her daughter. "I'm glad I could help fix your van," he said. "Thank you," said the little girl. "Now we can go to my grandpa's birthday party after all." She smiled brightly at the man. It was a smile he remembered very well from the park, a smile that was changing the world. I wonder how it feels when someone is kind to you. I wonder how you have been kind to someone. I wonder if kindness gets passed on all the time, even if we don't find out about it.
So let's join together in a time of prayerful meditation. Let's take a time to listen to the prayer of your own soul, to the prayers of our collective soul. It's good to take a time to pause. It's good to take a time for sensing our life and the life around us deliberately, intentionally, and forthrightly. It's good to pause and to know this moment as a fresh moment that has never been lived before. It is good to enter that place of feeling that connects us to one another, and to be part of that process of creating good feeling in the world as well. Taking moments to sense the depths within us, the depths within life itself, the depths that come to us through the tides, the colors, and the wonders of our natural world. It is good to pause, to sense, to know, and to feel. W.E.B. Du Bois reminds us in these words, the prayer of our soul is a petition for persistence, not for the one good deed or single thought, but deed on deed and thought on thought, until day calling unto day shall make a life worth living. So may it be. As we enter into a shared silence, let this be a time where we hold in our hearts those who we have a particular care or concern for, where we hold in our hearts our care and concern for the world for which we are responsible. Let us enter this shared silence, and following the silence, we'll have a time to name aloud those cares, those concerns, or write them in the chat if you're joining us on live stream. What names would you state in this space aloud or in your heart that you hold a particular care or concern for? What is your care or concern? You may speak them into this room or write them on the chat. May all whose names were spoken and those unspoken find peace and healing this day. The reading I've chosen this morning is from a book that I'll be referring to in the sermon, Humankind, a story of hope, a history of hope. The author, Rutger Bregman, writes, "Before I report on my quest for a new view of humankind, I want to share 3 warnings. First, to stand up for human goodness is to stand up against a hydra mythological 7-headed monster that will grow back 2 heads for every one that Hercules lopped off. Cynicism works a lot like that. For every misanthropic argument you deflate, 2 more will pop up in its place. Second, to stand up for human goodness is to take a stand against the powers that be. For the powerful, a hopeful view of human nature is downright threatening, subversive, seditious. It implies that we are not selfish beasts that need to be reined in, restrained, and regulated. It implies that we need a different kind of leadership. And third, to stand up for human goodness means weathering a storm of ridicule. You'll be called naive, obtuse. Any weakness in your reasoning will be mercilessly exposed. Basically, it's easier to be a cynic. The pessimistic professor who preaches the doctrine of human depravity can predict anything he wants, for it is his prophecy. If his prophecies don't come true now, just wait. Failure could always be just around the corner. The reasons for hope, by contrast, are always provisional. Nothing has gone wrong yet. You haven't been cheated yet. An idealist can be right her whole life and still be dismissed as naive. The time has come, he writes, for a new view of human nature. It's time for a new realism. It's time for a new view of humankind. On a cold morning like this, we might actually welcome some preaching about the fires of hell. Sorry to disappoint you, however, because it would probably be a cold day in hell when this preacher would be preaching directly about hell. However, this was not the case, my friends, in the atmosphere that gave rise to our Unitarian and our Universalist traditions in this country. They had to deal with a lot of hell being preached by their contemporaries in other churches. Trust me, that because our religious ancestors departed from their more orthodox contemporaries on views of God, of human nature, and of salvation, that they had to put up with a lot of hell in this life. Today, when we attempt to explain the distinctions between the Universalists and the Unitarians in our tradition, we sometimes say that Universalists believe that God is so good, so kind, so compassionate, that God would never condemn any of us to eternal damnation. And then we say Unitarians, well, they feel that humans, that they are too good to be condemned by God. Although these historical distinctions may not mean as much to us now, I do believe that our view of human nature, as I'll be explaining later, is so critical if we are to really face the challenges that are before us. We've inherited some points of view that we can easily take for granted today from our religious ancestors, but when they were critical and even dangerous points of view when they were being honed, within the theological and social climate of the early centuries of the Unitarian and Universalist movements. These convictions about God, human nature, and human agency oftentimes put them at odds against their contemporary religionists. You see, there was a time when people gathered in sanctuaries and were warned by and consistently warned about the fires of hell. In fact, in 1741, one pastor in a congregational church in Enfield, Connecticut, was so concerned that his congregation had not been impacted by the fervor and the emotional conversions being provoked by what was to be called the Great Awakening, that he asked the Reverend Jonathan Edwards to come to his church and give his congregation hell. And so that's exactly what Edwards did. In his famous sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. A famous sermon. And fortunately, these days, you don't have to put on asbestos gloves to read the sermon. You can go online and read the text, although I'm not expecting many of you are going to run home and do that. But if you did, you would discover that Edwards pointed out how wicked human beings are in God's eyes, how angry God can be, how at any moment, even you could be cast into the fires of hell, and that it is God's grace alone that could save you. So don't be too sure of yourself. The real effect, however, may be felt if I read you just a selection from his sermon. The God that holds you over the pit of hell, much as one holds a spider or some loathsome insect over the fire, abhors you and is dreadfully provoked. His wrath towards you burns like fire. He looks upon you as worthy of nothing else but to be cast into the fire. You are 10,000 times so abominable in his eyes as the most hateful and venomous serpent is in ours. Helen, I'm really hoping that someone didn't just tune in to the service on live stream to hear just these words by Jonathan Edwards, don't you? Okay. So, but perhaps you can kind of get a feel from those words of the kind of Calvinist ideas that caused our Unitarian and our Universalist ancestors of the time to forge a different point of view about God, about human nature, and about the capacity for good, and of the possibilities of humans to determine their own destiny in this life, and perhaps even in the next. William Ellery Channing's rallying cry sermon on Unitarianism in 1825 had the subtitle, A Discourse on Some of the Distinguishing Opinions of Unitarians. Distinguished, of course, from the vengeful, wrathful, angry, tyrannical view of God and its accompanying view of depraved human nature at the time. Channing developed this distinguishing idea. The adoration of goodness, he says, that is religion. Although Channing was reluctant to actually adopt the name Unitarian and start a denomination, their ideas were so distinguishing from the Calvinist-oriented congregations that it became inevitable for them to organize as a distinct movement. The point I want to make is that they not only had distinguishing ideas about God, but also about human nature. In fact, the two were intertwined. For example, Unitarians tend to not elevate Jesus as God, not just because of their anti-Trinitarian point of view, but also because they felt like putting Jesus on a pedestal would mean that the moral character of Jesus would be unattainable for other human beings. In other words, the more people they felt who would strive to follow the example of Jesus, the more they will cultivate the divine likeness within themselves. More poignantly, the Unitarians did not feel that their human nature was innately depraved. Instead, they felt that we could participate in our own salvation in a process of what they called self-culture, what we might call self-cultivation. Now, this difference, this distinguishing idea and point of view about human nature between some of their contemporaries and themselves could be easily summarized, I think, in this way. Although I'm exaggerating somewhat for the Calvinist human nature idea that has fixed qualities, that's innately sinful and depraved and almost immutable, like this stone, that it would probably require an extraordinary effort to change this view of human nature. A chisel, a hammer, a file, to change would have to be an act of God. The Unitarian view of human nature is more like clay, that we can each cultivate the divine within us, within ourselves. And even the worst conditions can be opportunities for us to grow our soul, for us to nurture new aspects within ourselves. And most of all, our own agency as human beings can give shape and form to who it is that we are as individuals and as human beings. This was the impetus for much of our religious ancestors for encouraging writing and reading and conversations, to engage in art and poetry. It was what underlies the social conditions that they sought to change in order that others could flower and not be limited by the barriers to cultivating the potential and the potentialities within their own soul. It's not that this conversation about human nature, my friends, is irrelevant to our own time. The historical moment that we're in fact, may make it more important than it has ever been. That was the lesson that I carried away from my study of Rutger Bregman's recent book, Humankind, A Hopeful History. Bregman is trying to counter a cynical view of human nature that is probably more prevalent than any of us realize and is certainly very fashionable. He's trying to provide countervailing evidence to some of the lopsided barrage of bad news that comes to us through sensational breaking news stories and then gets carried across the social media's tentacles into our very ears and hearts. We live in a time when this depraved view of human nature, this particular slant, gets proselytized not just by and within churches, but in our school boards across the country and within electoral politics. Even though we don't pause enough to really recognize it, and we tend to think of it as only political, this cynical view that humans are inherently nasty and selfish is like an undertow during our time. It influences our interactions with one another. It has a way of impacting our work world, our educational system, our criminal system, and here's the real point: our sense of hopefulness about confronting some of the major issues of our time: climate emergency, economic, and racial injustices. When we don't think much about human nature, it impacts our capacity to actually work towards the common good. We are predisposed to not see much good, much kindness in humankind when in fact there actually is. The underlying myth that Rutger Bregman exposes in his book is what he calls the veneer theory, the belief that civilization is just a thin veneer, and that as soon as something happens, soon as humans face challenges or adverse circumstances, we see the real human come out. The veneer theory reinforces that view that we are born as sinners, that people are, in the end, selfish and not concerned with one another. Bregman points out the real-life contradictions to this veneer theory, and I'll hold up a few of them. Most currently, he points out that the pandemic is showing us lots of things, but by far, it's also showing us that people are, for the most part, pretty decent. And that we can also see an explosion of altruism around us in so many ways. He wants to propose that human beings are kind-hearted by nature. One real-life example is from World War II. When the Germans bombed the British, they had in mind that the way to defeat the British was to defeat their morale. And instead, what actually occurred is that the British people rallied. They helped one another get through all of those days of bombing. They had a kind of what we'd call today a keep calm and carry on kind of attitude. Then they attempted also to bolster one another's spirits. One of the numerous examples is that a shopkeeper of a bombed-out store posted a sign that said, "Welcome, more open than ever." In fact, their wartime production actually increased. They pulled together, even in the midst of these horrific bombings. So one commentator at the time posted in a dispatch, "There is no evidence of the breakdown in morale." So when the British were faced with constructing their strategy at counterattacking the Germans, they could have decided to do some strategic bombing, bomb some railroads and some roads and so forth. And instead, those in the high command decided to use that same strategy and to bomb the cities, the civilians, under that same belief that they would destroy the morale of the German people. They decided to bomb the German cities, in fact, 10 times as heavily as the Germans bombed the British. The impact was not what they thought. Instead, what occurred is that the German wartime production increased, neighbors helped one another, they came together during time of adversity. Bregman's point is that in a time of crisis, most people tend to pull together and become altruistic. Wasn't just a kind of stiff upper lip British approach. It was an approach that can be shown in lots of other circumstances around the world. Some of our view of this thin veneer of civilization, that when it's worn down, the real human nature shows up, was also influenced by literature. How many of you read in school the book, The Lord of the Flies? Yeah, okay. It gives us a particular point of view of what happens when you have a group of shipwrecked British boys landing on this island, and as the book says, they became like savages. Well, the book has often given young people the idea that human nature is essentially fragile and antagonistic and uncooperative, savage-like, so to speak. Put aside Bregman's revelation that the author William Golding was an alcoholic, abusive towards his own students at the British boarding school where he taught, Bregman also points out a real-life story of a group of 6 boys in Tonga who in 1965 escaped from their Anglican school, stole a boat, got shipwrecked on an island. And when they were discovered 15 months later, it was discovered that they actually found a way to cooperate with one another. 2 people stood on watch, 2 people did the cooking and the food gathering, and 2 others were involved in trying to make sure that if a ship came, that they would alert the others. That news story of Kitty Genovese, who in the 1960s in New York was killed by someone who stalked her. How many of you remember that story? It says that there were 37 people who just stood by and did nothing. Well, the fact of the matter is that there were 3 people who stood by. 2 of those people called the police, and she died in the arms of her friends. But a whole theory about that bystander effect was developed in social psychology and through the news media, and we came to understand that you can't really depend upon human beings helping one another. Bregman points out the research that in 90% of all the cases where people do help each other. And we can know this now because there's cameras posted in various cities, and there's some research that studied 4 different cities and saw that in most cases, in 90% of the cases, people came to one another's help and aid. So the point I'm making is that our Unitarian ancestors pointed out to their Calvinist contemporaries that their view of human nature as essentially sinful and selfish and corrupt and depraved was a skewed view of human nature. And another view is actually possible, more clay-like than stone. So now we need to understand that our view of human nature is not really a theological or philosophical idea. It's, in our time, a very practical one. Because our view of human nature can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Climate change, economic injustice, those are problems that cannot be solved by individual effort alone. Yet the cynical view of human nature, which is really not that well founded, tends to reinforce that we can't come together to work on common issues, that we are too selfish to engage in what it is that we need to engage in together. We need to draw upon evidence and a more hopeful history about humanity as well. So an understanding of human beings as cooperative, as pulling together, and essentially kind is actually more well-founded. Now, this view, I think, is a better basis for our being able to tackle these collective problems in our time, where we actually do have to pull together. It matters what we believe. It really matters what we believe, as Sophia Faz says, that there are some beliefs that nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth. There are some beliefs that are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world. Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life. It matters that we become conscious of what our view of human nature is. Sure, human beings have definitely done some horrific things, but over and alongside of those things, we also have stories to tell of courageous people, of people who took risks on the behalf of others, who came to the aid and offered assistance. So the real matter is not what our view of human nature is. The real matter, in my opinion, is how each of us shows up each day. Do we choose compassion? And do we choose kindness when those are the options available to us? And the choices that we make each day shape who it is we become, who it is humanity becomes. I love this verse that I'll close with from what is a familiar hymn for some of us. Since what we choose is what we are, and what we love we yet shall be, the goal may ever shine afar. The will to reach it makes us free.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
Our stewardship moment is the time we invite you to financially support the work of this congregation. But today is the second Sunday, when it is our practice for a special offering recipient to receive our support. The recipient for this November is the Emmanuel Dining Room, one of First Unitarian's social justice ministries for the past 40 years. Like me, many of you over these years have had the opportunity to either prepare or serve meals for people in need of the Ministry of Caring's Emmanuel Dining Room. Here is First Unitarian Cindy Cohen, who has prepared a marvelous video to brief you on this work and invite your support.
Hello to everyone at First U watching this video. I miss seeing you all in person, and I hope you're well and continue to be so. As chair of the First U Emmanuel Dining Room team, I join with our whole volunteer team to thank you for your continued support of our monthly efforts to bring a hot meal to those in need in our community. This year's special collection is during the month of November, when Thanksgiving comes around to remind us how fortunate we are if we have enough food for our tables when we gather with our family and loved ones. Here at First U, our tradition of serving monthly meals at Emmanuel Dining Room, also affectionately known as EDR, has been going on for the 40 years that they have been in existence. We are grateful to be a part of that legacy, and your financial support helps us keep feeding folks in need. Last year during our annual collection, I talked about how COVID changed how the Emmanuel Dining Room is serving their food to maintain safety for everyone. Instead of dining in, They closed their dining room in the spring of 2020, and the staff is still serving takeout meals to all in need today. Renee Lafayette, the program manager at EDR, reached out to us earlier this summer to ask if they were to begin opening the dining room again, would we come back to serve our meals? They are exceedingly cautious, as their diners are some of the most vulnerable population for contracting COVID. I assured her we would be back when it is safe to do so, and that our commitment to Brother Ronald's mission of the Emmanuel Dining Room remains steadfast. In the meantime, we continue to prepare our monthly meal of chicken shepherd's pie, warm cinnamon apples, and cookies in members' homes, since our kitchen is still under renovation. We look forward to the time when we can gather again in the kitchen to prepare these meals, and the team really misses the camaraderie of the church kitchen prepping experience. If you're able to make a financial contribution to our EDR efforts, we would be grateful. As you know by now, there are 4 ways to give: by leaving money at the back of the sanctuary today in the designated box or basket, by sending a check to church designated for EDR, by using the Vanco Mobile Faith Engagement app on your smartphone and selecting the Sunday morning collection, or by using the Donate Now page on our website and selecting the Sunday morning collection. The EDR program here at First U costs $2,400 a year to operate, which is $200 a month for a meal that feeds about 200 people. So that's $1 a person. We do our best to keep our costs low, and our funds come completely from the generosity of all of us, the First U congregation, once a year. This is it. So please give what you can. If you can fund 1 month at $200, that's exceedingly generous. Anything less is also deeply appreciated. Your contributions will help us keep this First U program going, which means so many in our community will get a hot meal when they need it most. Brother Ronald's mission of serving the poor with dignity and respect will continue through these difficult times with all of our help. From the whole First U EDR team, we wish you a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, and thank you for your ongoing support, which continues to help make such a difference in our community.
Join me now in dedicating our offering to the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action. We dedicate our lives and these, our offerings.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions, we're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations, we're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
Before I do the closing words, I want to give a reminder that we've launched a project entitled Conversations That Matter, Matter Here. Even though we might be meeting in different places, even though we might not be having coffee hours with one another in the same way that we've had in the past, there's nothing that can stop us from intentionally connecting with one another through conversation. You will find in the back of the sanctuary a packet, someone's holding it up back there as well, that gives you all the guidelines that you need to participate in this project over the next few months. There's even a placemat that you can put on your table during the holidays and ask each other questions. Get some conversations started. It's my hope that we can start tilling the ground by making these connections and reconnections with one another as a way for some other greater things that are going to happen in January. So our closing words: look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life in its brief course, lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Such is the salutation of the dawn.
For those of you with the chalice at home, I invite you now to extinguish yours as Reverend Larry extinguishes ours with the reading of these words by Jane Zepka. When all is quiet and we are small and the night is dark, May we hear the tender breathing of all who lie awake with us in fear, that together we may gather strength to live with love and kindness and confidence. May it be so.